We want to thank you for joining us, and today we have a unique podcast and a unique episode, one where it is a celebration. If you are listening to this the week that it gets released, we just celebrated Veterans Day, and so we are excited to invite 4 different veterans from our church. We're going to hear from them in a second, but they can talk about what branch they were in, and you'll see part of the reason why I selected these 4. And and we're gonna hear from them and hopefully celebrate them. But I know this is something that hopefully those that are watching will make sure that you are taking time to appreciate those veterans in your life and in your family for what they did, the service they did, and what they have provided for the freedom that we have in our lives. And so we definitely thank you guys for your time and your service. And it is neat on this past Sunday when we asked everyone to stand up. There was those that I was like, man, I didn't even realize that person served or that, but there's definitely a representation in the church. And so we thank you guys for your service, and it's something that too often is taken for granted. So thank you guys. But we'll go around and you can introduce yourself, and we'll start off by, who you are and what branch you served in and how long you served.
Will Rodgers, I was in the United States Air Force. I think I was the first of the group here to enlist. We showed up for school first day of our senior year. Our teachers were on strike. I took the car and enlisted.
Oh, nice.
That's a bold move.
Yeah.
My parents thought so too.
Yes.
So I served, actually, because our teachers were on strike, our commencement was on June 17th. I was in basic as of June 15th.
Okay.
Wow.
So I was gone.
Yeah, you didn't. Yeah.
So I served, I did my first term, 78 to 82. Then I got out for a while. My wife and I started to get serious. I figured I need a job. And so I decided to go back in and served until the second term from 82 to 95.
Okay.
And then 95, they were paying people to get out of the military. And I had 15, 16 years in, and they said, you can retire. I said, see you later.
Yeah.
So that was, I had a great career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Went to some crazy places. Had one of the best jobs you can have as an enlisted person in the Air Force. And it was fun.
Yeah. I would say I had one of my childhood friends that I graduated high school with just retire after 22 years in the Air Force. He's out in California.
Hi, I'm Paul Merritt. I was in the Army. I followed kind of Will. I didn't know what I wanted to do after high school. I was tired of being a student, I think. And my father talked, he was drafted, and he really loved his time in the service. I mean, he didn't stay in or anything, but he the bonds, you could tell there was those bonds there that he really appreciated, and he kept for years. And so we all probably remember you have to take the ASVAB test or whatever to get your aptitude and where you want to go.
Yep.
And I took that test, and a first sergeant in the Army from the recruiting showed up at my house after that. And remember the time frame we're talking about, it was still feeling the pains of Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the people that were going in the Army in Will and my day they weren't high school graduates, a lot of them, and or had issues, or they were mandated to go in the military by some judge.
Yeah. Like, this is your option. Yeah.
And so he came to my house, and he said to me, he says, I would love to recruit you and take you in to the Army, but he says, I'm telling you, Paul, you will be bored out of your mind, because, I was basically a straight A student. And those, and my SAT scores were really high and all that. And he says, you will be bored because you'll do things in 20 minutes that most of these other guys will take hours to do. Mm-hmm. And he said, you need to go in, see your guidance counselor, and apply to West Point. I didn't know anything about West Point.
Yeah.
So I did. And, lo and behold, next thing I know, I'm selected to go. I went to West Point. I graduated from there, and I chose aviation out of West Point. At that time, aviation wasn't even a branch, so I had to go into some branch. So I went to Armor Basic Course and then went right to aviation flight school to be a helicopter pilot. And then while I was in my first assignment, aviation became a branch. And so then I went back and went to an aviation course and so forth after that. But I sent almost 12 years on active duty. And as Will said, that's when the military was downsizing and everything. And I kind of was in the same situation as his. I had options and everything. And I ended up getting off of active duty and going into the reserves. And I don't know how, but they just kept promoting me. And the next thing I know, I had 30 years in, and they said, "Okay, you're good now." And I got out, but I was enjoying what I was doing, and I liked it, and it was for me, it was a lot of fun. I worked with good people, and that's a key. There are a lot of good people in the military, and those bonds there you have, are great.
So did you? We'll come back to the helicopter pilot thing.
Okay.
If how long you did that role and everything. Going around?
Yeah, so Travis Pratt, United States Navy. Kind of very similar story there. When I was about, getting towards halfway through senior year or so, it was like I was keep looking like, what do I want to do with my life?
Yeah.
And I kind of said, hey, I guess if I go in, maybe check out what the Navy has to offer, it would at least buy me some time, get some GI Bill, so I could go to school later on, knowing what I actually, want to spend the money for. Yeah. So fast forward, I'm 41. I'm still looking to do, find out what I want to do with my life. But, hey,
still the goal.
Yeah. So the ASVAB went through that and did quite well on it. So I was asked if I wanted to enroll in the nuclear power program. So basically every submarine and aircraft carrier in the fleet now is operated by nuclear power, so it can sustain, long times out at sea without having to be replenished with fuel and whatnot. So that was a 2-year training that we had to go through because, they pretty much want to make sure that anything that could happen out there, you fully trained on what you need to know. And that's with any branch. Yeah. But, so we did that, and then ended up spending 4 years on the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Did 2 deployments there. And kind of like Will, I was at my 6-year commitment, and my wife and I started dating at that point. And, we said, hey, I think that this is probably good for now. Let's go ahead and get out and, do the family life and everything, so I'm not being pulled away constantly. Yeah. Then I took a quick 15 years off. And so it's very non-traditional here, but yes. 2 years ago, I came back into the Navy Reserves as an enlisted man. Spent 1 year-ish doing that, and then on October 12th, I commissioned as a Supply Corps officer. Yeah. So that was really neat. We got to do it down at the Brig Niagara, so for a Navy guy, plus a native to Erie, that's huge. So yeah. So that's kind of the path we're going on right now. So hopefully, plan is to continue on until I can retire. Mm-hmm.
And so it's and we'll talk through some of the things that'll lead you down, and maybe I guess it's not a duty station yet, and you won't be totally there, but like where you're going to spend your 2 weeks moving forward, is pretty cool.
Yeah, there's another 2-year training pipeline that I have to go through in order to be qualified as a Supply Corps officer. So
so it's, but all the while you'll maintain your full-time job. You'll still be here with your family, and so it's not like you're going to be taken away for 2 years.
Yeah,
but so for those that don't know the next person, you might figure out what branch he was in. We have Will from the Air Force, Paul from the Army, I would say Travis from the Navy, and
hold on, let me put my crayons down so I
Yeah.
can.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'm Rick Bales. I served in the Marine Corps for 21 years.
Just celebrated a birthday.
yeah.
Marine Corps. So
249 years, which
Yes.
means next year, it's going to be the big
that's
one.
a big one. Yeah.
Yep.
So very similar to these other gents where in high school I knew that I lacked direction. Thankfully, I did have that awareness that I knew I lacked direction. I had the self-awareness that I knew college was probably not going to be appropriate for me and not successful. So I made the decision halfway through my senior year to join and to enlist. And what I did, I didn't go like immediately after high school. I was working at the ranch, and I really wanted that one last summer to, to work at the ranch, be with my friends, and just have that opportunity. Now, I wasn't thinking this way at the time, but man, I did myself a favor, because if I would have gone to Parris Island in June, that would have been a very different experience. So
Yeah.
going in September after my senior year and graduating in December, that was a much better time at Parris Island. Not that any time at Parris Island is great, but
It's still going to be.
it wasn't 100 degrees
Yes,
at least.
yes.
So then, I was in the signals intelligence program because, my ASVAB scores were apparently pretty good, which is good because my grades in school were not good. So I tested well, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Will's like, I can relate.
Now, my focus in signals intelligence was more on the equipment side of things. Technically, my job was to work on and repair all of the high-speed equipment that processes that intelligence information. But that wasn't my favorite thing to do, and I was lucky enough that I got to kind of cross-train a lot into the analysis aspect of the field, and I really found that I enjoyed that a lot more. So I didn't do it often, but there was a couple deployments where I did focus on the analysis side, which led to some really neat opportunities. And then even stateside, I did as well. But I definitely enjoyed that more. So yeah, I did 21 years. I retired 4 years ago. Heather and I kind of always knew that we wanted to retire, move back to Erie County, near friends, family, everything else. So that was something we always were looking forward to, and we did that. We came back, and it's been really neat ever since. It's been nice to settle and not have to pick up. It's actually strange for us to not pick up every few years and move. We were just recently commenting, like, we've been settled for like longer than we ever have.
Yeah, I would say your longest
like-
part of your marriage that you've been in
Yes.
one place.
and it's strange because as much as I craved that and looked forward to it, and I am enjoying it, you do get that itch, like it's time to pack up and go somewhere. Like where's next?
I need to lose all my friends, leave them behind, and
Right,
then just start anew.
It just was such a regular part of life. So yeah, we're here and it's good.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I'm glad for that because, fun fact, I guess, usually your first salute when you become commissioned is like a really big deal. So I actually had Rick there for my first salute, so that was really
Yeah.
awesome.
It was incredible for me too. It was a really neat privilege and honor, and it was fun to be a part of that.
And I don't want to make any light of that situation, but I love any reason that makes Rick shave again. Because then his kids make fun of him so bad
Such a
about the baby face.
It's not just the
But
kids.
it was, when I saw that, I was like, man, that is so great that took place. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, Rick would, of course, had to shave. He went in uniform. Like, he would say, for, but yeah.
I actually had employees the next workday after that who the one employee told me, she's like, I'm not listening to you because I don't take orders from a 19-year-old. Like, I don't know whether to thank you or
I
be
know.
angry with you.
Is that a compliment or so?
Yeah.
Oh man. So we don't have to go in order. We can popcorn around with these questions, but I'd love to hear, is there a place that, like, maybe it was your favorite for whatever variety of reasons, but was there a most unique or favorite role that you had in the military, or a duty station or location that you stayed at? Because you've been different places. What was it that maybe one that stands out as like, man, this was a great one?
I'll jump on that one.
Yeah.
My It's not my first assignment because I went, as I said, you got to go through a lot of training, a lot of schools,
Yeah.
and I went through, a basic course, flight school, and all these other training first. But my first real duty assignment was in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I was a helicopter pilot. Flying in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Yeah.
And if you have never been to Alaska, I mean, Alaska is huge and beautiful. And if you like the outdoors, it is a great place to go and to be stationed. And
if you're a Merritt, you like to hunt.
oh yeah,
As I say, so it's like
everything
a lot somewhere.
fish.
Yeah,
I mean,
all of the above.
to be there when the salmon are running
yeah.
and watching, look at a stream that's nothing but red, and it's just gorgeous. It's a beautiful place, but. It's cold, and everybody said, and people say, how could you stand it? Because it would hit minus 40, at least for a couple weeks every year and everything. But, in Fairbanks, it was so dry. You know how they say in Arizona, oh, it's a dry heat.
It's a dry heat.
It's a dry cold there. So it didn't feel that because it was so dry. You couldn't make a snowball. And, it just was a powder.
It was so cold.
There was no moisture
And no
in
moisture,
the air.
yep.
And so to us, growing up here in Lake Erie area, when it's cold, you have that chill to the bone, raw, wet cold, and and you come in from playing in snow, you're soaked. Up there, Beth and I, we were riding four-wheeler out in the snow and covered.
Yeah.
You just you brush off. You could wear the same clothes inside the house without a problem. It was just incredible.
So unique. Yeah.
It was, and we just loved it. It's a beautiful country. It was beautiful, and I tell you, if they would have told me, I got promoted twice there, because by the time I was only there, I think a week. And I got promoted from second lieutenant to first lieutenant because, by the time I went through all my schools, nobody in the unit even knew who I was. They were like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Because they never saw me. None of them had ever met me because I got there. And when you go to Alaska, you have to go through a bunch of survival training because you're not only because you're a pilot, because you're in cold weather. Yep. So you go through that. So I was in all that training during those first couple of weeks, and they never met me, and I got promoted. But if they would have told me at that time, you can stay here the rest of your career, but just not get promoted past the captain, which I got, I would have said, sign me up. Where do I do it? Because we loved it because the winters to us weren't that bad. They were cold, and you had to guard against it, but it was just you didn't have that wet, terrible wet cold that we have here. It was just fun. You could enjoy it.
Yeah, and
unless you were a skier, because you had to have like 4 feet of snow to ski because it didn't pack.
Okay,
but cross country skiing up there was huge. I mean, they had hundreds of miles of lighted cross country skiing trails. Because up there it was in the wintertime there was like 3 hours of dusk.
Yeah,
that was it.
Wow.
So.
Man, that's unique.
Yeah, it was a very unique place, and we were fortunate to go there and live there. And
were you up there for 3 or 4 years?
3 years.
3 years?
3 years.
That's neat.
So my first duty station, my job was I was an air traffic control radar repairman. I fixed the radar that air traffic controllers use. So typically you would be stationed at a base that had a runway, and you just go to work. My first assignment was in an electronic installations unit in California.
Okay.
So my job was to travel and either install, remove, replace, do high-level maintenance on radar systems all up and down the West Coast, Arizona, and Alaska. So I spent 7 months on radar sites on mountaintops in Alaska.
Yeah.
That was desolate. Paul was in civilization.
Okay.
I think my furthest one was Kotzebue, Alaska, 26 miles above the Arctic Circle. Wow. I think there were 400 people in one tree within 600 miles.
Oh, man.
So, but we were busy.
Yeah.
And then after I got out and went back in, I still didn't get stationed at a base where I'd work. I got sent to, the Air Force has 5 combat communications units, and I got sent to one.
Yeah.
So we learned a radar that was transportable. If you had a C5, you could take the whole radar. And I never deployed from there. I was there 2 years, and then I got sent to Korea for an isolated remote, which means no accompaniment.
Okay.
So the first 2 years my wife and I were married, we were together for 10 months.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it was a lot. Then they said, you can go pretty much wherever you want. And so I picked Florida. I spent 6.5 years stationed at Homestead Air Force Base in South Florida,
Okay.
which is, we had the Air Force Conference Center there. We had the best golf course ever. So,
Yeah.
but then I got sent to another combat unit in Germany
Okay.
and served there till I retired. But along the way, I had a lot of different jobs within my career field, and it was a great experience. I don't know if parts of it were good. The combat stuff, I was in the Air Force. So when we got sent to the field, we just got sent to a hotel
Yeah.
with
yeah.
per diem.
Yeah.
And so
We had different experiences.
I went to Turkey in support of a NATO exercise in '92, and we were about 2 hours outside Istanbul. Mm-hmm. And NATO just has these airstrips in the middle of nowhere, nothing on them.
Yeah.
So we would fly in and set up the base.
Okay.
And so we were providing all the air traffic control communications, and the Marine Corps was tasked to provide the fire department. So they had their tent right next to our radar site, and we would travel back and forth to our hotel every night. So
and they stayed.
They stayed out in the tent, no doubt. Yeah.
we would bring them food because MREs get old.
Oh yeah.
Yes, they do.
We had them along just for fun. We didn't eat them.
Yeah.
So we would bring them food. And,
They were just a novelty. But
Yeah.
the crackers and peanut butter were good.
We're
Yeah,
talking, the
as a
jalapeno
snack.
cheese spread is fantastic.
Well,
yeah.
remember, this is '92. We're talking the inception of MREs.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
they weren't the gourmet meals they are today. So. But yeah, it was great. I met so many good people. Still
Yeah.
in touch with a lot of them.
Yeah. I was saying that's-
One thing about the internet or the Facebook.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it helps.
Yeah.
Yep. Did you guys have a favorite location or role or during your time?
I mean, I don't know that I had a favorite location or deployment or anything, because I mean, a lot of times when you are an engine room operator, you're looking to just come up with something to do. So a lot of times when my kids are like, "Dad, we're bored," and I'm like, "Wow, let me teach you bored, okay?"
Yeah.
So, like, oftentimes when we were down in the engine room just looking for something to do, we came up with this game, competition even maybe, where we would take one of those laser thermometers and we would get the temperature of the hull of the ship. We'd get 30 seconds on the clock, click go, and then we would rub our thumb on it as fast and as hard as we could to see who could get the biggest temperature change, right? And like, that was fun, you know?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, golly,
It was
so-
something to do.
yeah. So, yeah. But I think I would say that maybe the most impactful thing, and this is not even something that I realized until after years later. We had a port call in Turkey, and like, I mean, we had a great time there. A beautiful country. There's so many things to see there. I had signed up to go on a trip to some place, and we went there and saw it, and they had all kinds of Romanesque type remains and stuff, and they were talking about having the oldest library in the world there, and that stuck in my mind. And now we're talking like 2 years ago. Mal, Rick, and I in our Sunday school class, we were studying Ephesians. And while we were going through the study, in a video that we watched, they said something about the oldest library in the world, and I'm like, hold on.
Yeah.
So I went immediately home that day and pulled up all my old pictures, and I'm like, holy cow. Now, I wasn't a believer back then.
Yeah.
So it didn't mean anything to me.
Yeah,
but
the impact wasn't there.
correct. Yeah, but so now to know that, like, I walked the same streets of the people in Ephesians was super awesome to me now.
Yeah. And
So-
it's it's a neat thing that you can look back on.
Right.
For sure.
I think my answer would I'll say a couple things. For my family, though, the coolest place, the most fun place that we enjoyed was definitely the 3 years we spent in Japan, Okinawa. It was. It's funny because when I learned that we were going there, first of all, that was agitating anyway because I had just gotten off the bus from returning from Afghanistan, and my master gunnery sergeant was standing there, and he goes, "Well, welcome back. I need to talk with you." Okay. And he's like, "So while you were gone, like very recently, you gotten orders to Japan." And now I wasn't against that. I had already served a year in Japan and I loved it. But when Heather and I got married, I was already a Marine, so she knew that she was signing up, to kind of go all over the place. But she told me then, she's like, "Listen, the one place I have absolutely no interest in going, so you need to avoid it as much as possible, is anywhere in Asia, specifically Japan, because that's where the Marine Corps goes. And we don't go anywhere else in Asia." But she's like, "I do not want to go there. I will stay home, quite frankly. I'm not going." Yeah. And then, so of course, that's why I think we got orders there. And so I told her, and she cried, and like her worst nightmare coming true. And we got everything ready because the prep to go overseas with a family, 3 kids, it's a lot. Medical clearances, country clearances, just household goods. What are you going to take? What are you not going to take? Because you can't take most of your things. So we went through all that, and then we got there. And then just over the course of the 3 years, Heather fell in love with the culture. The kids fell in love with the culture. They learned the language. We spent way more time off base doing things than we were on base. We were exploring every day, every weekend, just as much as we could. I don't think there's too many parts of that island that we didn't explore and really enjoy. So as a family, that place, we just fell in love with the culture and the Okinawan people. The climate wasn't that bad either. Beaches all the time, year round. So that was great, and our family loved it. For me, my most unique experience, and it's going to sound weird, but I went on a deployment to Afghanistan, and my role in that deployment was to work on a joint team. It was a joint agency effort called the Threat Finance Cell, the Afghanistan Threat Finance Cell. And it had intel analysts and folks from all the different branches of the service, but the team was led by the Department of the Treasury, and the number 2, it was co-led by the DEA. And the whole idea of the team was to target the financiers of the Taliban and to exploit how are they financing the Taliban, and obviously poppy and the drugs and the different things that they were doing to finance. And we would find who's doing it, how they're doing it, and target and exploit those areas. And it just was partnering with DEA folks and Treasury guys, and I learned things that the Treasury does around the world that I had no idea. Some of them are lunatics, and it's kind of cool. And the DEA folks, same. And it was just one of those deployments that I'll just never forget. We would go from base to base a lot of times because we had to go all throughout the AOR doing different things. So there's a lot of time spent in helicopters. And you talk about how beautiful Alaska is. So I was there in the winter from September until March. Which actually made that deployment really hard because all the holidays and all of that there were a whole separate set of difficulties with that. I didn't enjoy that aspect. But Afghanistan is a uniquely beautiful country. I remember flying over some of these mountain ranges that they have and just thinking to myself, like, this would be an amazing destination place for, skiers or whatever. Just there's a lot of beauty in that country that you don't and won't hear about or see. And there were a lot of moments where I was able to kind of appreciate that. And then you get knocked right back into reality once that helicopter goes back down where I'm going.
I was to say.
That deployment, I will never forget the relationships I made, the connections I made. And it was just a very unique experience that I very much value.
So as you guys are all out, and Travis is back in to a certain extent now, but when something like Veterans Day comes up, or when someone finds out that you've spent time in the service and they're grateful and thank you, how do you normally react how does it make you feel, especially with the sacrifice that you guys have made over the years with your family and things like that?
It can be uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly.
It's an awkward thing. And I never respond the right way.
Right.
Thank you for your service. Oh, you too. Wait. No, that's probably not the right answer.
Yeah,
Sometimes it is, but it's awkward. I mean, but it means something, and it's appreciated, but it can be uncomfortable.
You almost want to say no big deal.
And sometimes I think I do say that. Yeah. Like, oh, it was my honor.
It was my job. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a
It
privilege.
was an
to
honor
serve.
to serve. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to get it from a younger generation.
Yeah.
It makes me feel good when it's somebody younger that does that, because, that's the concern, is that, our parents, was very much a part of their lives. They all served somewhere in the Navy, the Army, whatever. And for the most part. But, the younger generation, it's a lot less people. And so that makes you feel better if you have somebody that's younger that, that they know and they appreciate that. I feel good about that, and, have a good respect for them, that they acknowledge that.
Yeah. And I know that sometimes, and this is difficult, sometimes the thank yous are there and you guys don't even hear it. But I know I mentioned something to you, and I've mentioned something to you in the past. I forget who my kids picked this year, but at Fairview, one of the things that they raise money for the PTO is on Veterans Day. It's like a minimal cost, and you can put an American flag in front of the middle school right on 98.
I saw it. It's
and
beautiful.
All of those flags have names.
Yeah.
Of veterans that are being recognized. So, I think I know at least one is for my grandpa, who was in World War II in the Navy and is buried at Arlington. My mom's dad. And then Rick, I think, has a flag up, and he has in the past, and Travis has in the past. I forget if you got a flag this year. We were debating on, are you a veteran now that you reenlisted and all this stuff, and
Which I maintain that he is.
yes, I know, but I didn't. In my ignorance, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, no one's gonna check it anyways. If you want to put his name down, because obviously my kids are really close with both of their kids, and so it's like, there's an elevation of of significance in their life. But I do agree that trying to teach that younger generation, the importance.
And I like in Girard, and a lot of towns you see it in, the flags that they put of the people that are
And
that
the
live in
pictures,
in the picture they're still there, living in that area, and that you see that a lot. I don't know about the rest of the country, but in Pennsylvania, there are a lot of little towns that do that.
Yeah, and I think, and I get the uncomfortableness or the uncomfortability. I don't think either one of those are actual words.
Works
Sorry.
for me.
Yeah.
Discomfort.
And the discomfort, or just making you maybe feel awkward. But I think there's also a value, and I'm saying this more for people watching and listening that aren't veterans. Like, all of us that never felt led to go in for various reasons, most of which is because none of us could really hack it. It is a big deal. Like, there is something to it.
I made it.
Well, I know, but and I'm not saying that that's everyone's case. I think there's some that could make it that never went in.
Yeah.
But I think also part of it is or a willingness. That's just not what I desire to do. But that's why it's so important to recognize and thank those that did, so we had the freedom to choose not to, and there's something to be said for that.
Well, and I think one thing that you heard of, I think, from all of us when we started that journey was is that we really didn't know what we wanted to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with it, because you get there and it gives you a purpose.
Right.
Yeah,
and you kind of find yourself, and you learn to appreciate things. It's like, we are so blessed in this country, especially if you've traveled around, and I think all of us have traveled around the world and seen different things, and it's just like, we have it so nice, and most people in this country don't know how lucky they are to be here.
Yeah.
And so, you have that kind of appreciation for things, and you in the military, you know, because you've done without, you know, like, you know, you go through that, you know, times where, you know, you don't get to eat, you know, it's part of the training in some cases, but it's just like you learn to appreciate things so much.
Very much.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Travis, remind me, you came to faith a few years after you got out, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this next question doesn't really apply, I guess, until now. You know, in one sense, you know, it's not like you had no knowledge of God or anything, but how did you balance your faith with military culture? And I believe I don't want to say more faith, but there's a lot of people when you get in certain situations, you got to question some things in life, you know, and there's a lot of people that through those hard times of service might look to see a reason or you know, might come to faith because of what they've experienced or be driven more away from it. But how did you navigate that when you spent your time and just remain in your faith?
Well, so I was in teen choir here. I was in the puppet ministry with your dad and mom.
Yep.
Back in the dark ages.
Yeah.
And so when I enlisted, and my dad was a preacher, so I was a PK. Mm-hmm. When I enlisted, as soon as I got on that airplane, actually, as soon as I got on the bus to Buffalo to catch the airplane, I was on my own. I was doing my own thing. No more rules from anybody else.
Yeah.
And that's how my first 4 years, that's how I lived.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then after I got out, Debbie and I started dating. We were nominal Christians, you know, through much of our early marriage. Actually, until our first daughter was born and had some serious medical problems.
Yeah.
Then we were on our knees until we were comfortable. Mm-hmm. You know, we attended church, and then the biggest thing I remember is when I got to Korea. I'm on my own again. And the guys, one of the guys I'd been stationed with before, and he knew me before.
Yeah.
And the first day they came in, they're like, "We're taking you downtown for your initiation." I had a choice to say, "No, I'm not doing that here," or to go. And I went.
Yeah.
And the thing I can look back on now is the amount of time I wasted,
Yeah.
you know, running from God. And it wasn't until after I got out that God really got a hold of me and said, "All right, stop this nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, your life's not going to get any better than this.
Yeah.
You know, if you try to do it on your own." So for me, it was hard. I'm a very easy. I'll go with the flow. And that's kind of what I did, and because the military culture is not conducive to trying to live a strong Christian life.
Yeah.
It's just not designed that way.
Yeah.
I share a lot of those circumstances with you. Like, the first 4 years, because, you know, I say to some people, like, I was a good kid. I really, until I was 18 and in the Marine Corps, I really hadn't drank. I definitely didn't smoke. I was a good kid. And then something very similar happened. You know, we're at our, like, entry-level training, and there's some guys that got wind that I had never consumed alcohol before, and then it became a challenge. And I could have resisted. Now, I don't know. They're Marines. They probably would have dragged me. I don't know how much resistance. Like, you know, resistance is futile. But no, I was not exactly kicking and screaming. So, and I did have rebellion. You know, first time out on my own, doing what I want to do, doing it how I want to do it, experiencing, you know.
Having your own money?
Sure.
Yeah.
Not much of it, but yes, absolutely.
But still, it was yours.
It was mine. And so there was definitely that rebellion. Something I share with people is I never turned my back on my faith. I never lost my faith, but I absolutely rebelled against it.
Never stopped believing.
Right. but definitely rebelled against it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, yeah, it took me a little while as well to kind of come to my senses, for God to knock me on my feet. For circumstances there's no time to get into now, like 2008 was like arguably my worst year spiritually. It was a time where I was separated from my family for a whole year for a special duty. And I didn't deal with that loneliness well. It was after a couple deployments and before another one, and then separated from my wife and son. It just, yeah, I kind of bottomed out a little bit. And it was somewhat soon after that there was a recalibration that kind of started to take place. Got a lot more serious about making sure that the Lord came back into my life in a much more prevalent way. We were much more serious about going to church, and not only going to church in places we were at, but getting involved. Starting to actually maybe interact with the youth group or help out with that. There were different things that we would do. So yeah, it's the culture is difficult. You're swimming upstream. There's one moment that I will never forget that helped start to really snap me back into reality. Is like I said, I never lost my faith. So there would be times where it was shared that I was a Christian and a believer, and that would be known to my buddies. But then I would continue to just act any old way I want to, or act the way they were acting. And there was this one kid, we were deployed. It was actually OIF-1. We were in Kuwait at the moment, getting ready for the invasion into Iraq. And I'm so thankful for this kid. His name's Micah Fulcher. I'll never forget him. He's a great kid. But he was a reservist who had joined us. So he was one of those guys that supplemented us. So he was still kind of working and integrating into the unit. But him and I had some commonalities. And I remember one day after I was doing something dumb, inevitably, and he shared with me, he's like, I remember a while back, I overheard you say that you were a Christian, that you were a believer. He's like, and I've been watching you ever since then, because he is very, very much a believer. He's like, I've been watching you. He's like, and I don't get it. He's like, because no way that you act, nothing that you do, nothing that backs that up at all. He's like, you say it, but there's no evidence of it at all. He's like, and I kind of have a problem with that. And man, on the list of worst things that you want to hear as a believer, that's right up there.
Yeah.
Is that basically you are a hypocrite. And in some ways we all are, but in that moment, that pierced me. And that started to recalibrate me to get with it. This is not how I'm called to live. And yeah, that one, it struck a nerve for sure, but it helped.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, who was the biggest influence for you guys on which branch you chose?
It's a fantastic question.
Yeah, that is.
I do not do well on boats.
So funny from a helicopter pilot. It's not like you're keeping your feet on the ground.
No, I know. But when you're at the controls, it's very different than riding in the back.
Oh yeah, no, that's
and I learned that the hard way. Sitting in what we called the jump seat. Because when you were going through flight school, you got an instructor pilot and a pilot there, and the rest, the other guy or two guys there. You're sitting in the back. And especially when you got a new guy learning to fly, he's not flying very smooth. Yeah. He's all over the place,
I think every helicopter pilot I had was learning how to fly, even if they weren't.
But for me, I mean, I never considered the Navy because I can't do carnival rides or anything like that, man. I just get and it's over for me. So that wasn't. But I would say it had to do with like I said, my father was in and he talked about it. And so. That's the when I took the test, that's what I was looking towards.
And they came to you and suggested West Point.
He came to me and suggested. He said, I just think. He said, love to take you, and he says, I will if that's really what you want to do. But he said, I think you will be better off to go there. And he was right. I mean, he made the smart move because I would have. Like these guys said, that first 4 years, I was ready to kind of, I wouldn't say tear loose, but I would have, if I went to school, I would have wasted a lot of my time. When you go to West Point, you don't really get that opportunity to waste a lot
that's
of time.
just
There's
not an option.
Yeah, somebody's watching you, but at the same time, everybody's there to help you.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, if you can get there, you can get through it. You just have to want it, and because the help is there. You know, they're you know, whether it be tutors or whatever, mentors, everything. Everybody is trying to help you to get through because they've invested in you to do that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my choice. And I'm still to this day, you know, it's like, you know, every time somebody, hey, we're going to go out fishing, you going to go? I'd love to fish, but not on a boat.
Yeah. Like, I'm sorry.
I just can't.
I'm a stream fisher.
Yeah.
Right. It's crazy. Oh, man. Because, I mean, even as a pilot, I know it's different because you're in control, but you still went through some very...
Oh, yeah. I made myself sick one time.
Yeah.
You know, I was, when I was there. And
I'm glad to hear that.
You know,
Because so we were one time up in the Huey doing some like recon over an airfield that was going to be used as a humanitarian aid kind of depot, and we were just up there taking pictures to see what that would look like. And so I'm tethered, right? You know, there's tethers back there, and that's the only thing holding me in there. Other than that, I need to be able to go from door to door to take these photos. And the pilot knew. He had to know, and I think you guys are all alike. You do this on purpose.
You're all alike.
You do this on purpose.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
There was not one moment of just flying like this, like steady. It's just back and forth and back. Like, you know what I'm doing back here. And he was absolutely doing it on
Maybe
purpose.
he was trying to tip to one side so you get pictures, and then tip to the other to get pictures.
No, because when we
you're
landed
not
and we
buying
got
it.
off, no, we landed and got off the bird, and he's looking at me smiling. I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what was going on. My stomach was in my throat.
So the deployment that I was on in Turkey, the only thing flying in and out of our airbase were Marine Corps helicopters of every size and shape.
Yeah.
So one day they stopped by our little site, and I happened to be working. They're like, "One of you Air Force guys want to go for a ride? We're doing ACMs." I didn't know what an ACM is.
Yeah.
Air combat maneuvers. Yeah. So I get in this airplane, they're like, "We're going to make you sicker than..." And I loved it.
Really?
It was
So that's
great.
fun for you, yeah.
But, I mean, we were down in the valley with the trees going by,
Yeah.
and it was all fun until we came up out of this valley, and this is a big NATO exercise, and there's a guy from the Turkish army tracking us with a Stinger missile. Oh. And we're like, all right, let's go home. Because we had just inadvertently sunk one of their naval ships during that exercise.
Oh, yeah.
And they weren't happy. So.
Those were Marine Corps pilots. You know,
I know.
we would
Yeah,
never
the
do
Army.
that. would never do that.
And truth be told, the pilots of my bird were also Marines, so maybe it's just a Marine pilot thing. I don't know. I know for me, a big influence. So one of the deciding factors, like when I was deciding that I was going to join the military, I did have it in my head, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to pick, I don't know why, it's a self-defeatist attitude almost. Like, I'm going to pick the hardest, most difficult branch, because if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to do it all the way, right? That's what my head was telling me. But I did have a good influence in my uncle, Jack Pettis. Mm-hmm. I grew up seeing him do his thing, and I definitely looked up to him, admired him. And I remember even as a kid thinking that might be cool someday. And so, that was following in his footsteps to some extent was a bit of an influence for me, for sure.
What about you?
He loves boats.
Yeah. Travis, like, I'm opposite. I love boats.
Yeah.
Being on the water is his favorite thing.
Truthfully, it is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, growing up here, I was down at the lake any opportunity that I ever had growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents had a small 18-foot boat that we used to go out on all the time. Every vacation we would go on would be like to a, Florida beach or something like that. So I just knew that I didn't want to be on an airfield in Idaho. And if you look at every place that I've ever lived since I've gotten out, it's been somewhere that is, coastal, whether we call it Erie coastal. I mean,
You just stretch, but you
But
can't.
I mean, can't see the other side. So,
That's facts.
so I would say that that's probably the biggest contributing factor for me.
So there were two people that influenced, three, I guess. One was my high school band director had been in the Air Force, one of the Air Force bands. He was the drum major for the Air Force band in at Shepherd Air Force Base.
Who was
in Texas. Harry Winter. He was only there 4 years.
Okay.
The other was Rocky Pignotti.
Yeah.
Rocky.
He had been in the Air Force Station in Alaska, and I remember seeing his slides. He was some kind of big radio crazy antenna guy. Yeah. And it was fascinating. Mm. And then the other one was my dad. My dad had wanted to join the service, wanted to join the Air Force, and was medically disqualified. So part of it, I think, was I joined because my dad couldn't.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That is neat. And you don't think about how much of an influence something like that has on your life, where, you know, you hear a story of your father who wanted to and then wasn't able to, and just the influence that has when you go to join. It's interesting. Now, before our last wrap-up question, I had a couple questions, like, when's the last time you flew a helicopter? Did you continue doing that all the way through? And then remind me if I'm wrong, did you retire from military service, then go have a civilian job at West Point? Or
Yes.
Okay, because I thought that was part of.
But actually, I'll answer that one first.
Yeah.
I retired, and I think I had close to what they call 60 days of terminal leave. You know, I had
They still call it that.
Yeah, they accumulated leave, and so I had like 60 days, and so basically, I was retired, and I went over and took a government job, and so for a while there, I was getting two salaries. You know, I was still getting my Army salary for 2 months, and then I was working in this civilian job.
Yeah.
But then I was, at that time, I was in the reserves. So as soon as I got off of my retirement was official at the end of that time, I was I had joined the reserves, and so I went into that role. So,
And then
flying wise, the only flying assignment I had after flight school was that assignment in Alaska.
in Alaska, okay.
Yeah. I had a very unusual career for a person that hits 30 years.
Yeah.
Because after that assignment, I was either in a school as a student or I was at a school as an instructor
Okay.
for the rest of my career
your
on
time,
active duty. And then I, when I got in the reserves, I didn't belong to an actual unit. I was what they called, for a while, was called an IMA, which is an individual mobilization augmentee, which means I was just an individual there with certain skills. And my job was to replace somebody on active duty that gets deployed. So if an instructor at West Point or a guy that taught the military instruction in the Department of Military Instruction, if they had a unique skill set that required that they were required, during Iraq or Afghanistan, they left, they would bring me in and I would be put on active duty to fill their role in that instructor thing. And I did that for, I don't know how many years it was until I was right around my 20-year mark.
Okay.
And then the positions were coded by your rank. And so in order for me to get promoted again, I had to give that slot up and just go into what they call the IRR, which is the inactive ready reserve, which means I'm in the reserves.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm available. I can do it. I can do stuff if I want, or I can do absolutely nothing, and I happen to choose to do things. I taught all kinds of classes, and I was a big part of the admissions program at West Point, running courses for juniors in high schools that would come up there and things like that, and running a bunch of different programs for them, and doing all that. And I would get put on active duty to do that, and in the summertime, I lived in the barracks for like a month, running these various programs.
Camps.
Just various programs for admissions and other things like that. So I did all that, but because I found it, I tried to get into a reserve helicopter unit, but in New York, they had combined the National Guard and the reserves aviation, and there was a lot of tension there.
Yeah.
Because there weren't enough slots when they combined it for everybody. And
Yeah.
some of the guys that were in the reserve unit that were doing classes with me, because I was still doing military classes to get my
Yeah.
points and everything for retirement. They'd tell me, Paul, you want to stay away. You know,
Yeah.
do not do that. Find something else. And so I did. There's plenty out there to do if you wanted to, and that was part of how I got promoted, because a lot of my peers, my classmates, if you will, that were in the reserves, they weren't doing anything. They were trying to stay below the radar because they were afraid they were going to get, that somebody say, "Oh, hey, this guy's out there. Let's deploy him." You know, because guys were getting deployed to combat areas, and I wasn't doing that. I was doing it, but I'm sure they looked at mine and said, "Oh, this guy's a Huey pilot. We don't even have Hueys anymore."
I know. It's like that's not. Yeah.
What are we going to do with him? And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what it was, but
Yeah.
I was out there, and I was getting all kinds of points and doing everything, but I never got called or deployed in that scenario where a lot of reserve guys that were just
Ended
out there,
up doing that.
That's no different than now.
Right.
Yeah.
Not much has changed. Yeah.
Right.
And so at that time, you got into coaching wrestling at Army.
Yeah, when I went back to West Point, and I was still on active duty. I was on active duty, and I taught in the electrical engineering computer science department for 3.5 years before I got off of active duty.
Yeah.
Within the first 6 months, I was in with the coach and working with them, and back then it was very different because there was only the coaches for the wrestling program were actually part of the Department of Physical Education. They didn't work for the athletic department per se.
Okay.
It was and they separated after that. But they only had like 2 coaches. One of them was actually a wrestler, a really good wrestler.
Yeah.
The other guy, he was a physical ed teacher, and he was good at recruiting and doing all the mission,
Yeah.
but he never wrestled. He loved wrestling, but he never wrestled. And so I was in there, and I was helping, and I became volunteer coach and what they call the officer representative for the team.
Yeah.
Every sports team, every club, everything has an officer and sometimes an enlisted person that works with those clubs, and they're there to oversee things and mentor them and develop them in all aspects of their military and professional development and personal lives, and to keep a watch. I'm like, say, it's hard to fail at it because there's somebody watching your grades, watching everything, and you start to slip a little bit. They're like, you need to go and get this fixed, or you aren't competing anymore. Or you're not going to be in the debate club. You need to go take care of this because this is priority number one.
Right.
And so I did that, and I ended up being a volunteer coach for many years until they started bringing guys in, and they had like 4 coaches now, and they were all they're all being paid. And I said, you don't need me, because it got to be a point, at that point I was getting older and working out with the guys, after about my 3rd trip to the emergency room. My wife says,
Beth's like, hey, Paul, what are you doing?
Yeah, she's like, I don't even want to hear it. She said, you got to understand, you're getting older. They stay the same age. You get older. And she said, I got 2 words for you. Nursing home.
Nursing home.
So she's like, I don't want to hear it. So, and it was a lot of time, because on almost every weekend I was traveling with, the younger guys. I took like the 2nd and 3rd string guys to tournaments here, competitions here, while the main guys were going, and and when you do that, you don't get a bus, you get a van. Yep. And you're the driver, you're the coach, you're the trainer, you're everything, and it's like, we were getting back at 2:00 in the morning, and stuff like that. So it got to be a little bit tiring after a while, and I just said, okay, you got enough coaches.
Yeah, you guys are good.
You guys are good, and I even, I told the coaches, the parents of those kids, they want to see one of those 4 coaches. I said, you reach a point where it's like, hey, their kid came here. They want to see them. They know who I am and they appreciate it.
Yeah.
But it's not the
Where's the
same
paid
thing.
staff?
Where's the paid
Yeah.
guy? Where's the
Yeah.
guy that recruited
Right.
Yes.
my son? Where is he?
Yeah.
And because that's what those guys do. Most of the junior coaches were part of the big part of the recruiting, and so I said that they need to be out there.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up on this. I would love for you to real quickly, without too much explanation, but if you went back to your 17 and 18-year-old self, would you do it again? And even if the answer is no, I probably wouldn't go back in the military. I'd love to hear what's one way that you feel the military has helped you become a better person. So we'll start over here and work our way around. But would you do it again? And either way, how has the military helped you become a better person?
Unequivocally, yes, I would do it again. I would do it in a minute. In some ways, I wish I could even go back and do certain things again. So that's a definite yes.
You could pull LeBron James, since your son is about to sign
Yeah,
some papers to enlist after he graduates this year. You could be active. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, he would not want me to be a
No,
step in
he would not.
COIC.
Yeah. He would.
That's better for someone else to do.
Yes.
But that's funny. And then, man, it's almost unquantifiable the ways that the military made me a better human in so many ways. I needed discipline. I got that. I needed structure to thrive, and I had that. I wanted experiences outside of Albion, Pennsylvania, and I got that. And to, I think it was Will's point earlier, Will or Paul, but going to places like the Philippines or Afghanistan and seeing the way some folks around this world are living, watching as we were in the Philippines and watching, you could actually see from where we're at, the women going up in the morning to get water from the well and bring it back to their house. And that was like, wow, that just seeing that with my own eyes. So making me appreciative for what I have in the country we live in. Just again, I could sit here for 2 hours and not get to all the ways and reasons that I feel like the Marine Corps was just the right move for me. And the experiences that I had, the connections that I made, the lifelong friends that I made, just too many reasons to list. But I would definitely do it again.
Yeah, I'm
your
doing
answer
it again.
better be yes, because you just did it again. Yeah,
Definitely doing it again.
Otherwise, Travis, we should have a conversation. Yeah.
So obviously, yes, I would. And kind of all those same reasons. And this time around, not only doing it for myself this time around, but doing it for the next generation of military members that are currently there. Just I guess for a quick example, I was down at the hovercraft base in Virginia this past summer and talking to some of the junior sailors about different things. Like I overheard the one guy, he was about to deploy, and he's like, I'm not dating anybody or anything right now, but I think I'm going to go ahead and just find some girl and marry her so I can get family separation pay. And I was like, whoa, let's pump the brakes here a little bit and talk about this. Like, it's $300, and what are you going to do? Split it with her? It's like, So just some of that stuff. I've had more than a number of opportunities to kind of mentor some of these younger guys, so I enjoy that. As well, so.
And that is a very unique thought process and unselfish in the fact of one of the big reasons you're doing it is to help that next generation, which is great.
I wouldn't change, my decision, but if I had the opportunity to do it, I'm kind of I like to experience different things. Yeah. So if I, it's not that I regret it, and it was definitely the right decision for me and the right move, and everything has been great. but I would have done something different. I have no idea what that is,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you know, just to have some
Just
other
to have a different
experience. But I think the big thing that, you know, as Rick talked about, you get to see things and you experience things and you appreciate it. The other thing for me, and that's, you know, my father was right. The bonds with, you know, your soldiers and your peers in the military, it's so much stronger than, you know, anything else I've ever experienced. You know, I'm still, you know, great communications and doing all kinds of things with, you know, classmates and people that we've been stationed with, and it's hard to explain to people that bond.
But it's real.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I shared before we started recording about the connection of two Army Rangers, and I didn't realize a guy that I grew up with, you know, Pastor Rick's nephew who moved down here from Buffalo, and he worked at the ranch. Like, he served with another man who was the father, well, him and his wife, because they were both Rangers, but their child I coached at Fairview in track, and it was, you can just tell when I went up to him and I said, "Hey," and I just mentioned Sean's name, he lit up and he's like, "Wait, what? Why'd you say his name?" And I'm like, and then I started explaining the connection and the bond they have, because it's so different because being on the battlefield and all those things. But like you said, it is a different bond.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just you, because like when you and I would assume it was for you guys the same, but like when you go away and deploy for whether it's a month or longer, and I know in the Navy is a long time, especially if you're a nuke guy. I mean, those guys go out, they have no idea where they're going or what they're doing when they leave. But I mean, and you got a family. Yeah. But I'll tell you, in the military, you don't have to worry about them, because there are people back there that are looking after and take care of them. You know, they're, you know, the neighbors. It's like, you know, if you're a neighbor to somebody and somebody's, you know, husband or even wife at this point gets deployed or whatever, there are people that are going to be checking and after, and you know, it's just incredible to have that system there, and it's not something that's formalized. It's just that's what they do. Yeah, that's just a part of that life and culture that's there.
Yep.
And they do it because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Yeah. How about you, Will?
Looking back on what my life was at that time, I don't see how I had much choice. There's no way I could have made another choice.
Yeah.
Was there a judge involved there, Will?
we referenced that earlier of some of the ones.
No. And the job I had one of the best electronics jobs you could have in the Air Force. And I got some opportunities to go to some great places, weird places, and do some cool things. And so as far as, I think one of the things I'd have done differently while I was in was take more advantage of the opportunities for furthering my education. Because I went from being a mediocre student, like I got by on my wits and my memory. I didn't study. I didn't, you know.
What was the quote last night at our elders and deacons meeting? "I've never taken a note in my life in anything." That's Will.
That is what he said.
Yeah. Got by
wife,
on your wits and your memory.
My wife got me through geometry. And Mary Ellen Holly got me through senior English.
Okay.
That's funny.
And then I got in the service, started going through school.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to be in a couple drum corps while I was in, but my grades started to sag, and they're like, "You can't play anymore."
Yeah.
So I got put on a different shift, and my grades shot right up. And I'm like, "Oh, I guess I can do smart people things, you know?"
Yeah.
And I mean, I went from I don't know that I made it through Algebra 2. Probably did with a D.
Yeah.
And within 6 months, I'm doing Boolean algebra and octal and hexadecimal number system.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
This is crazy stuff. And I think I would have, well, I would like to have settled down more.
Yeah.
But the one big thing, like everybody said, is just the bonds.
Yeah.
This past winter, we were down in Georgia visiting my parents, and I had some old friends from when I was stationed in California. We all lived in the same dorm, and they were a married couple. They'd gotten married out there. And we got together for lunch and went over the old stories, most of which horrified my wife.
Yeah.
But, and it was just, it's like we hadn't been apart for almost 30 years, know? And so, yeah, it's different than, like Paul and I went to high school together.
Yeah.
We have that bond. But these people, you were stuck with them, and you had to get along.
Yeah.
And you had these shared experiences, and it knits you together. Like very few experiences can. So.
Yeah.
Facts.
The petty stuff goes away.
Yeah.
It's like it's like now we're going. Just went through the big election and all that.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff, that doesn't compare to that thing that you have with them, and that's unbreakable. No kind
Absolutely.
of thing. It's there.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things of you can tell someone has a different set of loyalty when they've served because you had to, and that translates over into your life outside of. Now, it might take a little bit more to get in that person's inner circle to be loyal to you, but if they're like, if you are part of their life, their loyalty is just different. It is. And that's a real testament to the development in that during your time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. And for those that are either watching or listening that also served in any capacity, we thank you very much for your time and your service. Also, love the discussion, and to get to hear a little bit more of your guys' background and your time in, and just to understand you guys a little bit better. So thank you very much. Thank you for everyone for joining us in the Federated Squared Circle, Wrestling with God's Word. We'll see you next week.